First thing, Rudiger's Almanac is now on Backer Kit. Please, if you can afford to, go over there and at least grab the PDF. We're almost there. Last I checked, I think we're at about 80% to funded. But yeah, if this thing gets funded and I can get my hands on it soon, I will probably make a video or an audio about it every day for at least a week, and I'll probably be blogging about it for a month straight. So yeah, if we get Rudigers going, let's get Rudigers going. And that brings me to my next topic, which is old school. Now, old school is usually old school Dungeons and Dragons, which I don't have a problem with that. It's not my main focus of the channel, and it never will be. I I've heard some of the older guys talking about, well, why my channel is all OD&D. Okay, I guess. I have several reasons for not wanting to do that. Probably the main one is I like a lot of the new games that are coming out. I also love Dragonbane, which is technically not an old school game, or well, it kind of is. I don't know. Drakkar Octeminer is an old school game, and Dragonbane is just basically a repaint of it in English. So yeah, I guess technically. And when Treadvang comes out, that will be old school ish as well. It's also based on the Dragonbane platform, so it'll be rules that I'm very familiar with. And I recommend everyone get familiar with the Dragonbane rules because they're awesome. And I will never completely stray from Dragonbane, even if I do talk about Rudiger's Almanac, or if I talk about Shadow Dark, or possibly Twilight Sword when it comes out. I have the PDF beta in front of me right now. I'm really loving it. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But OD&D being a kind of decent game. I mean, depending on which version you've got. Now there's, BX, and I know some people swear by it. Personally, I kind of swear at it. It's not my favorite. Obviously, the original white box D&D is so janky and just buggy that I personally would never run it. Now, that's not to say, I think people shouldn't, or I think it's bad. I mean, it's a perfectly fine game if that's your jam. Go for it. But not for me. So let's see. There's Holmes. There's Moldvay, which is BX. When we get into BECME, Basic, Expert, Companion, Masters, and Immortal, that's what I grew up on. That's kind of my favorite. And it's funny. I hear some of these older guys saying, "Well, we never got to the Companion set. I don't even know what's in there." We barely got into Masters when I was a kid, but it was good. And I really liked the companion books because it introduced Druid among other things. And I'm a huge fan of the Druid, so yeah, that's like kind of my thing there. And then later on, the Rules Cyclopedia came around, which is kind of a revised version of BECME, and that's probably still my go-to as far as like old D&D goes. I like first edition AD&D just fine. Like I've never had a problem with it. It's a great game. Would I go back to it? Probably not. Second edition AD&D still probably my favorite of the two AD&D games. I've run tons and tons of second edition. I've played in tons of second edition. I've soloed a lot in second edition, and I really prefer the system as far as old school games go. That's groovy. I ran a lot of third ed D&D, in 3.5 both. They're both very solid editions of D&D. It's kind of the roots of the Wizards of the Coast D&D that we have now. Um, and so I kind of respect it for that. As far as like the skills and the way they redid the armor class system and just all that and the feats and the revision of the spells. And we'll talk a little more when we get to fifth edition about something I don't much care for. But yeah, like 3E, 3.5, really solid games. Would I go back to running them? Maybe. I don't know. It kind of depends. I mean, with everything being out of print, I'd rather grab a current game like Shadow Dark or Rudiger's Almanac or Dragonbane just because they're more, I think, more relevant, I guess would be a good word for it. Anyway, and then moving on to 4E, I know a lot of guys really dog on 4th edition D&D. I don't think it's the best edition of D&D. And some people have even said that it really shouldn't be called D&D because it doesn't resemble D&D. I think it's just D&D from a completely different framework because at the time Wizards of the Coast was going through a lot of changes with D&D. It works more, they were trying to compete harder, I think, with World of Warcraft, which is why we had like the Minotaur and why we had the segments and the way the system broke down in terms of initiative and the abilities all broke down in terms of timing. It just, yeah, it was a different game. Again, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I definitely go back and pilfer it for a lot of things because there was a lot of great innovation in terms of player utility and GM utility. And I made a lot of magic items for that game. I'm giving some serious thought about porting a bunch of my magic items over to Twilight Sword, just because I think the Twilight Sword mechanics kind of lean into that fourth edition OD&D feel. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just barking up the wrong tree on that one. I don't know. We'll see. And then we come to the 2014 fifth edition of D&D. OMGs. Here we go. Because I really thought it was just going to be basically third edition the third time around. Now, that's not to say anything negative about it. I liked third edition, and I think 5e is just fine. I guess if that's your thing, cool. And I know there's been a lot of books dropped for 5e under the open game license, even since the great OGL debacle of 2023, where the open game license came into question and Wizards was going to revise it, and the entire community revolted, and they didn't change it. In fact, they put it in Creative Commons, which is a whole nother story, and I'm not going to get into all that right now. 5e. I first read the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I was kind of hoping and praying that I was going to find something similar to what was done in third edition and 3.5, where there was like, kind of an encounter building approach with the XP where you could get monsters A, B, and C. They added up to this much, and it was suitable for a party of this level. So basically you have X number of monsters and worth X amount of XP, and you have Y level players, and that is just not how that worked. And even Wizards of the Coast admitted that they were using a different system internally to build encounters and quote unquote balance encounters. And I'm old school in the fact that I don't need my encounters to be balanced. Like I write a lot of monsters for Dragonbane that are certainly not suitable for inexperienced players or even veteran characters to run into. Just because, yeah, like the option of run the heck away needs to be on the table sometimes. If you want to keep your character alive, sometimes backing off might be a good plan. But I know most groups tend to rush headlong into combat and don't necessarily think about the consequences if it's too big or something they can't handle. Seemingly innocuous encounters sometimes can turn deadly if people aren't using their heads. So, yeah, I like games that encourage players to think. Now, Dragonbane does actually technically have death saves, so that's one mechanic that I think has carried over from 5e D&D into other games, and I like it. I won't say. I mean, we kind of had something like that back in the day. Only it wasn't. I don't think it was a saving. I think it was just a straight Constitution roll. It was just roll under your con. I might be wrong about that, but basically, if you were reduced to 0 or less hit points up to negative your Constitution, I think we let you have a saving throw versus death ray or a Constitution roll. I can't remember which it was. It might have been one and then the other. But yeah, yeah. Like I've never been a fan of instant death at 0 hit points. There's been workarounds over the years that we were using clear back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that have gotten lost to time and kind of buried. And that's cool. That's one thing I like about Dragonbane and some of the games that have come kind of since 5e. I convert a lot of 5e material because I have like Mists of Akuma, and I have all these 5e monster books. In fact, I regularly was collecting 5e monster books, both the official ones and the unofficial ones, from DM's Guild and from Drive Through RPG because there was a lot of good stuff there. There still is. You just have to get past the 5e mechanics and rewrite it to whatever game you're using it for. So if I want to use a 5e monster in Dragonbane, I just pull it over, flip some stats, and one of these days I'll do an actual video showing how I kind of convert one to the other. There's not a technical process to it. It's kind of eyeballing it, but hey, and then we come to 5.5e D&D, the Abomination edition, where they put player facing material in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and there are now, I forget how many subclasses in the game. There's basically like 3 or 4 subclasses for every class times 13 classes, and then they've been adding subclasses in practically everything they've released in the last, I don't know, 5 years for sure, probably longer. I kind of gave up on official D&D after 2022, so just because they announced the new edition, and I kind of rolled my eyes and went, "Wow, you guys are announcing a new edition a year and a half before it drops. I wonder what's going to happen in that year and a half because I didn't think that was very well planned out." And Wizards of the Coast was already on a massive downhill slide. It was like a race to the bottom there for a while. Kind of still is. But yeah, I like I say, I don't do 5.5. I don't have a problem with other people doing it. Great. If you want to play 5.5, play 5.5. That's what you and your group decided on. Hey, I'm all happy for you. Really. I think it's a fine game if that's what you're into. And I've read through the player's guide, I've read through the Dungeon Master's guide. I have not seen a monster manual for it yet. I mean, I've seen it, but I haven't read through it yet. But if that's your jam, cool. I think for what they brought back into 5e, they've made it such that, and I know a lot of people have said this. I'm gonna say it, but I think it leans toward superheroic characters, and it leans toward the Vox Machina characters from the animated series, and that kind of critical role play style, which yeah, that's another subject entirely. The superheroic characters that came with 5 point, well, they kind of started out in 5.0 edition D&D. And in 5.5, they've just gotten out of control. I don't know how you can even challenge a party much past about 5th or 7th level, and that's where most campaigns die these days, or so I'm told. I mean, personally, like I say, I don't run 5e. I haven't touched 5e in a couple of years now, because I've got other games I'd rather be involved with. Um, I kind of dog on Pathfinder, but it's basically just another edition of D&D. It's the continuation of third edition Dungeons and Dragons, and then later on the 2E and 2E Core and 2E Core Remastered and whatever they're calling it this week. Sounds a lot like D&D. Sounds like a lot like D&D 5e actually. I think both from the corporate culture standpoint and the mechanics standpoint of Pathfinder 2e. Unironically, I know Paizo and Wizards of the Coast flip flop staff on a regular basis. That's how Jason Tondro ended up creating a union at Paizo and then promptly moved over to Wizards of the Coast. They can do that all day. You're not going to convince me that WotC basically controls Paizo at this point. If you look at who profited the most from the great OGL debacle, really the money landed in Paizo's pocket because everybody swapped over to 2E, and then like not even a year later we had 2E Core Remastered in front of us, and so everybody had to go out and buy all the books again. It's a lot of money in Paizo's pocket. I know a lot of people talk about how Old School Essentials is part of Dungeons and Dragons, just not the same name, and it leans heavily into BX D&D, which is fine. I've actually got some source books for Old School Essentials, and I really like them. But yeah, they do kind of lean into BX D&D quite a bit. Now, that's not to say I haven't gotten classes and everything else that are rewritten for Old School Essentials, and Old School Essentials is basically my kind of go-to if I want to run like an AD&D style game or an old VX D&D style game. I haven't had as much time with it lately because I've been more involved with Dragonbane and I've been more involved with some of this new stuff coming out like Shadow Dark and Rudiger's and Twilight Sword. And I know I keep mentioning those because, well, like I say, they're pretty awesome, and I hope everybody gets a chance to give Rudiger's a try because it's really a neat little system from Richard Witters. He's had a lot of experience in the industry. He's working with Kaywood Publishing, and they've had a lot of experience in the industry. If you look, they've got like what, 6 successful monster books and some adventures, and Andrew Kaywood has written a lot of other stuff just kind of in the middle there, and he's really good at what he does. So I have a lot of faith that Rudiger's Almanac is going to provide a good time. We knew in 2023 and 2024, with the new edition of D&D coming, suddenly everybody and their dog had a fantasy game out. And there are still new fantasy games coming, like Rudiger's Almanac, and I saw 2 or 3 more. Sword World is coming, which is basically the BRP version fantasy. It's the D100 fantasy that came out of the old days of gaming, back when Call of Cthulhu was young and basic role playing was just taking off. That's the D100 system from Chaosium. They had different worlds. They had Super's World. They had Fantasy World. They had, I think there was a sci-fi game too, if I remember right. It's been a while, but yeah, there's like D100 games for basically anything and everything. That's what basic role playing does, and I actually would consider that an old school game. Again, really great, but I love what Dragonbane ended up doing with the system, which is basically condensing down from a D100 down to a D20. Because if you think about it, a D20 is basically a percentile die. You just have to multiply. So take whatever roll you've got times 5. Oh, wait, that's a percentage. Neat. 5 times 20 is 100. So there you go. But I like the roll under mechanics in both games, both Dragonbane and BRP. The roll under to me just makes more sense because that way you always know what you're shooting for. There's no, hey, game master, what's my difficulty? Or I rolled a 15. Does that actually do anything? It's more of, okay, I have a 15 skill in this. I rolled a 13. Yay, us. We picked the lock. Now what? And just describing your actions more and just being careful with what you're doing and describing what you're doing goes a long way. So in that term, I guess in that respect, I am kind of an old school guy. Will I say, oh, I'm totally old school and I love old school better and I'm completely 100% rules as written AD&D first edition? No, no, I am not. In fact, I prefer to, adapt, latch on to new rules models and new rule systems and newer games. I back a lot of Kickstarters, or at least I was. I'm not now. Other than Rudiger's Almanac, I'm pretty much done for the year, I think. Uh, I say that and then something will come up. Seriously, like Twilight Sword's going to be great, and I'm loving the beta. I'll have lots more to say about that here in the days to come. I'm loving D6. D6 second edition is theoretically coming closer and closer to being distributed. In fact, I think I got an email today that said it went to the printers. So I'm really happy. And we'll probably be talking about D6. I don't know, some people consider that an old school game. Like the D6 Star Wars, definitely an old school game. I've run Star Wars until I was blue in the face. I miss Star Wars. I would run Star Wars again in a heartbeat if there was actual official support for it. But I don't feel like Fantasy Flights or whatever they're called these days is doing anything with it. Like it just the license kind of fizzled out again, and I'm sure Disney gives zero F's about role playing games in general or anything analog. And my God, I really want nothing to do with what they've done to the Star Wars franchise, so we just won't go there. Uh, anyway, back to kind of old school style games. Like I say, Dragonbane is still my jam. It's my go-to. It's my baby. I love it. It's been kind of a friend to me the last few years, especially. I've spent some time solo gaming with it. I've monkeyed around with it. I've let the kids try it out. And yeah, it's a solid game. Yes, it is kind of old school. It's definitely a little more basic. Things are a lot more broadly described. I try to stick to that style when I'm designing items and monsters and things like that. To leave it kind of broad for the game master to monkey around with or to interpret however they want. Yeah. Uh, and like I said, there's been just a flood of fantasy heartbreakers and people trying to beat D&D at being D&D. Truthfully, I think with this 5.5 edition, they've beaten themselves quite harshly, I might add. Will they ever be the same again? No, probably not. Yes, they've apologized to the Gygax family, sort of, and they've brought Luke Gygax in to do something. Hopefully, it makes it past the sensitivity readers and all the other nonsense. Because, yeah, it'd be nice to see something Gygaxian coming out of Wizards of the Coast, I think, maybe. Does that mean all will be forgiven and I'll completely forget how they've been acting? No. Am I kind of interested to see what 6E is going to look like? Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested in the respect that if they go back to more of a third edition style game and they go to more of a basic style of play, then maybe I'll look into playing 6th edition or running 6th edition. Not holding my breath yet. The number one thing I would do if I had to run 5e is I would toss out the subclass system completely. Like there are just too many freaking subclasses. It's to the point now where you don't have to multi-class anymore. Although if you do, and then you take this other subclass and then you do all this maximizing, you can have the cheesy weasiest character on the table and do just about anything on one roll. And I'm not down with that. I firmly believe that if you're going to take a subclass, it shouldn't overrule or overwrite all of the features of another class. If you want to play a mage that can wield a sword, maybe you look into taking that as a proficiency or trying to talk your game master into or your dungeon master into letting you have a sword because that's how we used to do it back in the old days. And there was no sword mage subclass, but I guess now there probably is. Like, so fighters can cast spells, mages can swing a sword, thieves can heal, clerics can pilfer things, and it goes crazy all the way around and around and around and around. And I don't like subclasses at all. If I had to ditch one facet of the game, that would be it. I would let fighters have weapon proficiency in terms of like specializations and things. I liked the old specialization style back in basic, and then later on in 3E they kind of brought it back, and 2E I guess. I used to specialize my fighter characters to the nines. Like I love having a dwarf with a heavy crossbow and can shoot like twice in a round and hit for ridiculous amounts of damage. That was kind of the good old days. I know they're talking about kind of modifying the Dragonbane rules, and I hope we get something like that that maybe helps the professions of knight and fighter stand out a little bit. I think that'd be cool. There's a lot of like tweaks to the professions coming in Tridvang from what I hear, which is fascinating to me. And I really wish I could get a chance to speak more directly to Thomas Herenstrom and some of the staff at Free League, but so far my my requests have been denied, alas. But I'm trying, and I do talk to Uber strategists every once in a great while, just kind of check in and let them know that I'm still interested in some of the stuff that's coming up. Maybe not everything. I do like Free League. The Mutant Year Zero system is all fine and dandy. It's just basically a modified version of the D6 rules. If I'm going to play a D6 game these days, it's going to be Outgunned. I love Outgunned. I am anxious to try and get to run Outgunned as an action flick or Outgunned as a superhero adventure, maybe even Outgunned as a sci-fi adventure. I've kind of had some thoughts on how I might do that. Have like a space opera style flick. I won't say like Star Wars because I don't want to copy Star Wars, but definitely something that's not hard science fiction where we have to worry about all the very, very basic science fiction elements. I want to bring in that kind of space fantasy feel to it. Um, so yeah, that's one thing that's kind of sticking out maybe for the future. Like I said, somewhere in the very back of my mind, there's a science fiction game brewing. Um, whether it's an add-on to someone else's game or if it's my own unique system with all of my own unique setting. But that's a lot of writing. And right now, I'm in the middle of creating a source book for Dragonbane, specifically magic items for Dragonbane. And I think that'll be a lot of fun when I finally get it all put together and test it out and decide, if this is what I want to do. But yeah, that's coming hopefully this summer. It's definitely in the works, and maybe the Dragonbane Book of Magic will beat me as far as time goes, or maybe it won't. But I've got the beta, and I'm using the information in there to kind of help me reconstruct some of the stuff I already did, and it's taken a few minutes. It's taken a while. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. It's kind of what I do. And I think on that cheerful note, I'm gonna get back to work. So I will talk to you guys hopefully soon. And like I say, if Rudiger's Almanac funds, I will definitely be back to talk about that more. Like I say, I'm gonna make videos for about a week if it actually gets goal, because I think Rudiger's deserves all the attention we can give it right now. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.